Good morning, welcome to Extinction Rebellion. It's the end of week 8 and the last of the sessions this week that I've been flying solo. So Martin Lucas this week has been off on holiday, whatever on holiday means at the moment. I think he's just been sat in his garden mostly, and fair play to him. I said a bit bitter, don't I, which is not actually my intention. So thank you to all of you who've kept company with me this week. Also thank you to those of you who are watching on catch up. Always appreciate that as well. And what we're going to do today is go through effectively sort of live Q&A, so sort of live clinic. And the idea here is that you bring your questions, you bring your problems, and we'll try to hack through them over the course of the next half hour or so. And as we've hacked, and then hopefully I'll have some value to add there, and we will see how we go. So please drop your questions into the chat as we go along. I'll try and pick up on them. I can't promise to pick up on all of them, but I will do my very, very best, and I look forward to seeing what you have to say. So last night I had a question come through actually from somebody who is going to be watching this on catch up and hasn't but doesn't have the chance to be here this morning. And this question was, I dropped it in the chat actually, this question was, if one's income has dried up due to Corona lockdown, is it the right time to consider a completely new career direction / new business model? How does one work out what it should be? It's a very, very good question. Actually, it's not one question, it's two questions. And the first question is really, am I in the right career or indeed in the right business? And the second question is, if I am in the right business or career, how do I ride through a rough time? So let's take both of those questions in turn. I would say to know whether you're in the right career or the right business, it's quite understandable that at the moment a lot of people are having questions around that. We're in a position where we've hit a massive pause button. Lots of us don't have quite enough to do. People on furlough, for example, or people whose revenues, as the questioner says, have dried up and therefore have just got less, client work on or whatever. And that inevitability of wanting to take a step back and having a think about our lives, and I'll think about, the role that we're playing in the world is absolutely inevitable that we would want to do that, and right that we would want to do that as well. The danger, of course, is a form of kind of overcorrection, where we think that because things have got a little bit rough, that actually we need to change everything and do so really, really quickly, which I would always caution against. So these 5 questions actually allow you to make sure that that you're not in a position where you're, where you're doing that. And they are as follows. So question 1 is, what am I passionate about? So passion really means, or another way of putting it is, what gets me out of bed in the morning? So I think the danger with passion sometimes is that we all think we have to be, on cloud 9 with our work. Actually, sometimes what passion is the thing that you care about that keeps you going, despite the fact that things can get very, very tough at times. Passion and purpose are the things that really give us that grit, I think, a lot. We've got to be clear on what they are. So what is it I really care about manifesting in the world? What is it I really just generally care about in my life? That's the question of what am I passionate about? And that goes to what we do with our lives, which is what we do with our careers, our businesses, and so on. The second question is, where is my unique value? So if you look back over the course of your career, maybe even over the course of your life in some senses, think about the experiences that you've had, think about when you've been at your best or when you've been at your worst. Think about, what perhaps the great work is that you've done, and then start to think about, what is my unique value? What is it that I can bring that no one else can bring, or at least that very few other people can bring? It's a difficult question for a lot of us, unique value, because it challenges our sort of inner modesty, I suppose, or in a sense of, I'm just one amongst many. But actually, all of us are unique individuals. All of us have got something very special to offer the world. And it doesn't have to be the most revolutionary thing, but just being really clear about who you really are and where you bring value is vital. The third question, what's the market opportunity for you know, for what I offer, for my goods and services, if I'm running a business. So market opportunity really is, what is the route to taking this to market that actually means somebody is going to pay me to do it, which is of course vital from a career point of view, and it's vital from a business point of view as well. And market opportunity at the moment, it might be the tough one, because actually it's the thing that's changing, and it's the thing that's, you know, we're perhaps a bit less certain about than we might have been a while ago, and that's something I'll talk about a little bit. But, you know, but being really, really clear on what that market opportunity is absolutely vital. The fourth question, what financial aspirations do I have, or how much money do I need to earn, is another question. Now, a lot of us have really complicated relationships with money. You know, we get in our own heads about it. It becomes a kind of lightning rod for our, you know, worries about the present and the future, and our hopes for the future as well, actually. And I think it is really worth checking in our own attitude to money. A couple of thoughts on that, you know, is there was endless psychological studies have been done about the fact that, you know, earning over £50,000 a year adds actually nothing to our net happiness whatsoever. And I would say, in the course of our work, a lot of small business owners particularly wildly overestimate the amount of money they actually need in order to fulfill what they want to fulfill in life, you know. So, you know, you should price up the house, price up the car if that's what matters to you, price up the kids' education, price up whatever else is going on, put an actual figure against that, and that becomes the basis for a useful discussion. And a timescale against that figure probably is really helpful as well. And then there's, what lifestyle do I see? So that might go to time with friends, time with family, could go to, you know, hobbies and interests that you've got, travel in some cases. And by the way, there are jobs out there as well that can really satisfy the need for travel, even if the travel industry itself is not perhaps in a great shape at the moment. So, you know, what lifestyle do I seek is about understanding that, you know, there is a relationship between what we do in our life and the rest of our life, and there has to be, in some senses, balance there. You'll also start to see, as you go through those 5 questions, that tensions emerge between them. So perhaps what I'm passionate about, there isn't much market opportunity for at the moment. Perhaps where I add unique value actually isn't going to allow me to earn the amount of money that I think I, you know, should be earning or want to be earning. Perhaps I've got major financial aspirations, but actually my lifestyle aspirations are in conflict with them. I want to earn a ton of money, but only work 2 days a week. You know, and so those questions are great levelers. What they will do is they will force a degree of balance across everything to make sure that we're in a position where we are totally and utterly clear around what we're actually doing in the world, you know, and why we're doing it in the world, because they're ultimately questions of purpose. When we've got those answers to those questions, I think the next thing that we should be having a think about is, if the answer to that is yes, I feel like I'm in the right career, I feel like I'm in the right business, then one has to look at the lack of revenues at the moment and go, well, that could be pointing to one of 2 things. The first thing is, we're just going to have a choppy ride for a bit. You know, there is a thing called the Stockdale Paradox, which is really worth looking up here, which is about, you know, the idea of survival being ultimately to be able to hold 2 competing thoughts in your mind. The first is that the future will be great, but the second thing is I need to stare the full horror of my present sort of firmly in the face, you know. And that seems to me to be very, very important, to be able to acknowledge the problems that we've got at the moment, and therefore sometimes take action to deal with them. But at the same time, we can't lose hope that the future is going to be great. And, you know, if we are in the right business, in the right career, the job is to acknowledge the issues, the pain that we've got at the moment, and then to make plans to address that, which might just be to do with financial runway as much as anything else, while we work our way towards what a better future looks like. So what we're not doing is throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You know, a career and a business that we're really actually passionate about, we're just sort of binning because things have got a little bit tough, you know, for a period. So the Stockdale Paradox is really helpful there. But if the answer is actually, you know, no, I'm not in the right business or the right career, or I am in the right business or right career, and but I think actually we've got a real problem on market opportunity, a real problem on revenue model, then I would say to you, go back to some of the content that we've talked about in previous weeks on recession rebellion. You know, I've talked before about the importance of building a learning organization, the importance of making sure that we've got, you know, the right, you know, we've got the right tools and practices in place so that we can test and learn really, really quickly. You know, the importance of those kind of plan, do, review cycles. The thing about inventing new business models and things like that is they don't happen quickly. They don't happen overnight. You know, it takes time, as career reinvention takes time as well. So there's no knee-jerk reaction here. This is going to take you time. And the way to do it is to be a bit experimental. From a career perspective, that might involve, for example, building a bit of a portfolio of different things for a while you work out exactly what's right for you. So, you know, and the reason I say that, and I stress that point, that reinvention does not happen overnight, whether at the business model level or the personal level, is it's right to take it seriously. And you have to know before you start it that this is exactly what you need to be focusing on doing, which is why those 5 questions, questions of purpose, those questions of what am I passionate about, where is my unique value, what's the market opportunity for my services, what money do I need to be earning and what lifestyle do I see? Those, by the way, come from my friend and mentor, Derry Llewellyn-Davis. Well worth looking up as well. Usually a source of extremely good insight and advice at times like this. You know, those 5 questions are immensely helpful in terms of just making sure I'm being sense checked that I'm in the right place before I start that reinvention process, or I'm not in the right place and therefore I need to start that reinvention process. So it's quite a complicated answer, I suppose, to quite a short question, but I think it's the right one. I think, you know, it's important at times like this that we're thinking about the right things in the right order. So thank you for that question. Okay, we have another question coming in here, which says, how would you go about creating a social movement? We are looking to create a social movement about well-being at work. Okay, so this question is all about how do we create a social movement? And the questioner here is going, I want to create a movement around the importance of well-being at work, and how do I go about doing that? Okay, well, I mean, the first thing to say is, look, to be honest with you, I don't profess to be an expert in the building of social movements. I think that there are people out there, if I were you, that I would be wanting to go out and interview. So for example, I might want to talk to some people who work for, you know, Extinction Rebellion might be a good place to start, actually, and someone who's built a brilliant social movement there, or there'll be people in politics or wherever else who absolutely it's worth talking to, because some of what they've achieved is remarkable. But I'll try and give you a couple of things from my own sort of experience to have a think about. So maybe the first thing is actually, you know, how do we get to, if we're going to build a social movement, it seems to me that we've got to have a pretty sort of chiseling point of view on the world. We've got to have pin sharp clarity on what we think needs to change, why it needs to change, and how it needs to change. And that pin sharp clarity has to manifest itself in you know, a sort of very clear positioning for what it is you're trying to do, a very clear proposition, which is to say promise to the audience, and a really clear theory of change, which is to say, actually, this is the how. If we do this, then the world will look better. Yeah. So this is how we bring about change. So absolutely pin sharp, kind of razor sharp clarity about positioning, proposition, and then in the end, you know, theory of change are absolutely vital to being able to grow anything. And I would say, I think well-being at work runs the risk of being, it's a bit waffly, it's a bit nice to have, not need to have, you know. So what is the urgency? Why now? Why now? Why now? You know, and you know, if you look at something like Extinction Rebellion, it's all about climate change, but there is an urgency there. You know, there's films been produced about we have a decade to reverse climate change and so on. So, you know, the positioning is really clear, the proposition is really clear, we've got to do it, and the how, which is here are our 5 demands, are also really, really clear. The second thing I'd think about is then, you know, these kind of social movements, I think in the end are very content driven. So what we need, you know, really kind of sticky, socially shareable content. I mean, my sense of it a lot of the time is that they work as almost like hockey sticks, you know. So you do a lot of stuff over a fairly long period of time, and then in the end, it's sort of there's a tipping point. I'm definitely reading the tipping point, but I'm glad will be useful, I think, too. So, but the sort of the content factory needs to be going, because there needs to be a lot of really good quality, sticky, shareable content that gives people something to hook into, buy into, share with others. I mean, Extinction Rebellion, and this is not to sound judgmental at all, by the way, my personal view is this is just sort of factual, is that I think one of the things that it did really, really well was not only did it say to its audience that, its audience didn't want to just do something about climate change. It wanted to be seen to be doing something about climate change. One hesitates to call it virtue signaling because that sounds like a value judgment, and it really, really isn't. It's just, I think it's just an understanding of the psychology of the audience that is attracted to Extinction Rebellion. But that thing about wanting to be seen to share it. So when it goes out on Instagram, when it goes out on Facebook, when it goes out on Twitter, whatever, it says something about me. It says something about my value system, who I am, how I show up in the world. Is also they've leveraged that, I think, really, really well. So for me, it's that pin sharp clarity on positioning, proposition, and a theory of change, and then a lot of content production, a lot of sticky, shareable content that in the end builds to what I think is a hockey stick model and gives people sort of badges of honour, I suppose. Those are the things I think that probably help to get it going. But as I say, you might be advised to talk to people who understand social movements and have actually built a couple themselves. Okay, let's move on and have a look at another question here. Okay, so this question is quite an interesting one, because it basically asks the question of, when I'm taking creative ideas into my team, I'm often sharing them with them, and I'm worried that they are not as developed as they might be, and how do I bring those to my team? Okay, so this question's a really interesting one, because it really talks about when a senior creative person, I'm engaging with my team, how do I bring ideas to my team in a way that sort of, gets the best out of them, whilst at the same time doesn't compromise my seniority, is effectively the question here, right? So what I would say is, and it's a good question, right? I mean, look, ideas are fragile and trembling things. They're very kind of small and really fragile things. Really worth reading the Red Right Hand Files by Nick Cave here. So the singer-songwriter Nick Cave, he publishes on a weekly basis really letters between himself and his audience, actually, called the Red Right Hand Files. I think it's redrighthandfiles.com you can go to. And he's an absolutely unbelievable writer on the creative process, and also, the human experience, metaphysics, our relationship with mythology, and a whole load of other sort of slightly woo-woo sounding stuff, but actually it's so beautifully expressed and so true, actually, a lot of the time. It's a tremendous read on a weekly basis. I think one of the best things that anybody's publishing right now. And he's fantastic on creativity, and he always talks about ideas are really precious and fragile, and when they come into the world, they need nurturing. And I think it really goes to what kind of creative relationships do you seek with the people who are working with you, right? So there can be a tension, I suppose, in a lot of our thinking, can't there? Especially as senior people who are strategists or creative folks, which is that, on the one hand, I acknowledge that ideas are trembling things and fragile things, and I need the help of others, and I want the help of others so that I build them, so that they get built up. On the other hand, I feel that if I ask for that I'm somehow compromising my seniority. I should be able to come with the final answer, or something that looks close to the final answer. So I would say, I think, it goes in the end to, how do you contract, which is to say, seek agreements from and with the people around you about the quality of the creative conversation that you want to be having. Being able to have discussions where we acknowledge we are bringing ideas in, and we're going to work together to nurture them, as distinct, because they exist on a continuum, this kind of stuff, as distinct from, say, conversations where you, the senior person, are reviewing somebody else's work that may be a little bit more in an advanced state, and you're giving much more directive feedback or go, no go decisions, for example. They're different types of creative conversations. And I see absolutely no reason why having that early stage conversation, bringing in, really, really rough or really early stage ideas should compromise seniority at all. In fact, I would say that the most accomplished creative people, the most senior creative people I've worked with, are actually some of the ones that are the least nervous about doing that, because they know that it's part of the process. They've proven it's part of the process, and they have the self-confidence and the grounding and the belief in their own value to be able to do it. So I think you've got to just think through, there's different types of creative conversations. There's different modes of creative engagement, and think through what is it you're actually putting into the team, then how are you seeking agreements about those different modes, and energetically, are you showing up with the right level of confidence? Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. Yes, there's a question down here about, okay, so this is quite a long question. I'm going to try and summarize. So in effect, the questioner is asking here, she's saying, I run a digital business which targets individuals. I'm now looking at running a digital business which helps other businesses. Should I incorporate in order to do that? Should I stop being a sole trader and start being a limited company? Well, you're actually asking two questions there, and they need pulling apart. The first question is, I've been doing one thing, should I start to do another? So I've been looking after individuals, should I start looking after businesses? And the second question is, should I incorporate, should I remain as a sole trader? So to the first question, I think, my answer would be, I would say think very carefully before you dilute your reputation, which is to say your brand, your network, your service proposition, by trying to do two things instead of one. So there's a reason why psychologists will tell you that people don't like buying combined TV and DVD players. We're just primed to think that they're less effective than separate components are, in effect. So there's definitely something for me about how do you, if you want to do two things, how do you make sure that you're not compromising the one thing that you're known for at the moment? And, making sure that you are not fighting, again, if you're not to use too many army metaphors, but if you're fighting wars, you don't fight across two fronts at once. It's just diluting the power of your army. And of course, there are, practical considerations that go with that then. So, making sure that you're not dividing up all your resources. So, your time, energy, money goes into two directions, not into one direction. All that kind of stuff, I think, are really, really just worth thinking through. I'm not saying don't do it, and you're sitting there going, well, they all feel like one and the same thing, Phil. But my own experience has been, be very clear on one target audience, one proposition, and make sure you don't lose sight of that. I think is absolutely critical. And then, to your second question, well, around whether or not you should incorporate, look, I'm not an accountant, and I think it's absolutely worth speaking to your accountant and getting professional specialist advice on this. But I would say that being a limited company just comes with a couple of interesting things to think about. The first is protection. So as the director of a limited company, you are protected in ways that sole traders just aren't. So provided you've carried through your fiduciary and legal duties as a director, so you've not allowed the business to trade insolvently, for example, you've run it in a commercially prudent way, you've made sure your annual accounts get filed on time and so on, then nobody can pursue a business if it incurs debt it can't service, for example. Nobody can pursue that unless the director has specifically agreed that they can be pursued for it by way of a personal guarantee, or unless they are in certain situations trading insolvent and so on. So there are levels of protection that come with being limited. The other thing is to protection, it can be easier to get things like insurance as well. So making sure that you've got good professional indemnity and legal expenses insurance. And if I haven't talked to you about legal expenses insurance before, it is totally worth getting as part of your professional indemnity package without going into our sort of history, and some of the actions we've had to take over, in the past, it's definitely worth having that in place. So I would say, it can be easier to obtain that. Also, VAT registrations. It's just a cleaner way of working, in my particular view. The downside, of course, of running a limited company, a bit more admin and sometimes a bit more cost than you want to go as a sole trader. But speak to your accountant about that. There is nothing in the proposition of doing two things or one thing that determine that have a direct correlation to the structure, other than maybe if you're dealing with other businesses, sometimes they like to deal with limited companies as well, but mostly those are quite separate questions. So, but I hope that gives you something to think about there. So that, I think, is about it for this week. That's been week 8 of Recession Rebellion. Thank you very much for joining. Next Tuesday, we will kick off with a session from me about the adaptive organisation. What is an adaptive organisation? How to build one? What its attributes are? And all sorts of other questions as I start to turn my and hopefully then your attention to what does it mean to build a resilient, responsive, and innovative business that can survive and thrive no matter what this pretty capricious world chooses to throw at it. Because I think, that's the key question that needs to come out of this pandemic, is how do we make sure we're prepared for now just the economic downturn we've got, and also, the next time that less desirable things happen. Pain is always on the way. So on that, slightly negative note, I suppose, but not really. It's been good fun talking to you this week. Thank you for keeping me company. And I look forward to seeing you on Tuesday. If you could share, as always, we'll get this up on LinkedIn. Share it for people. That would be terrific. And I look forward to seeing you very soon. And bye-bye.